Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another video for Eve Echoes. Now, if you follow this channel or my content at all, you should know that my main character recently respec'd out of being a frigate and destroyer main, and now also has skills in cruisers and battleships. I'm essentially considering him to be a covert ops specialist. He's flying mainly like the Estero, the covert ops frigates, stealth bombers, the covert ops cruisers, and yeah, a Typhoon 2. That's a bit of an outlier, but there is a reason for that as well, and if you've watched my video on the Typhoon 2, which I'll put in the description below, you'll understand why I've done that. Now, today I picked up an Arbitrator III Covert Ops, which is what you can see here on screen now. Gorgeous looking ship, one of my favourites as far as the Amarian ships go, and that got me thinking about the different Covert Ops Cruisers, and I realised I haven't really talked about them all that much in a dedicated video. Like, I did a video looking at the 4 different Covert Ops frigates. Today we're going to be looking at the 4 Covert Ops Cruisers, which I think are best and for what reasons, and for what usages you might want them. Now, of course, I'm going to be covering 4 different ships in this video, which means I'm not going to spend all that much time on them. If there's one in particular you want to see more of, then do make sure to let me know in the comment section down below, and I might consider doing a full-blown video on that one ship, especially if it's one of the ones that I personally enjoy flying. Beyond that though, if you have a particular one of these 4 ships you want to learn about a bit more, whether it's the Blackbird, the Bellicose, the Arbitrator, or the Celestis, I will put timestamps in the description as well. Finally then, if you enjoy this video, let me know by hitting like on it, sub to the channel for all things Eve Echoes, ding the notification bell, making sure to tap all notifications, and if you want to go the extra mile to help support this channel, which would be awesome, then of course I have a Redbubble merchandise store and a Patreon page as well where you can pledge to support. That's all linked in the description below. Anyway, with all that said and done then, let's jump right in to talking about the various different Covert Ops Cruisers in Eve Echoes. Now, before we jump in and have a look at any of the Covert Ops Cruiser lines in specific, I just want to spend a moment talking about what it is about Covert Ops Cruisers in general that I think makes them very special and stand out compared to the other ships you might be flying at cruiser level at the same tech level. Now, the first and foremost fact, obviously in the name, is the fact that they are Covert Ops ships. They can fit Covert Ops cloaks, and if you know anything about me, you'll know I love Covert Ops cloaks. These are exceptionally useful devices. They allow you to sneak through gate camps undetected because you can warp whilst cloaked. They are the only type of cloak that allow you to warp whilst you're cloaked. You still can't activate any of your modules, but if you arrive into a new system and you're inside a gate camp interdiction sphere, you can quickly activate the micro warp drive and the cloak at the same time and start powering off into the distance. Whilst you're cloaked, you're untargetable, and then once you're outside of the bubble, you can warp to safety. On the other side of things as well, if you arrive in a system and you suspect there might be a gate camp, you can activate the cloak whilst you're warping so that you land in the bubble on the other side already cloaked and can then slow boat your way to the gate without being targeted and destroyed. That alone is just really, really powerful. The second thing that I really enjoy about the Covert Ops Cruisers is their speed and their size. If you look at the signature radius, if you look at the flight velocity and the inertia modifier and mass of a Covert Ops Cruiser, these are very small, very hard to hit, fast cruisers. They are pretty much, they're not actually far off some of the frigates and destroyers. Very fast, nippy little ships. Thirdly, they have surprisingly good E-War. Each of them is dedicated to a different type of electronic warfare, which can be very useful both in solo play and in fleet play, both in PvE and primarily, however, in PvP, and that's something we're going to be focusing on a lot through this video. So expect me to talk a lot about how these are small, fast and nimble ships, how they've got really good E-War, and how much I love the Covert Ops cloaks. Anyway, with all that said and done then, let's start off by looking at the individual Covert Ops Cruiser lines, starting with my least favourite, although not because it's the worst, far from it. I think this is actually a really good ship, the Gallente Federation Celestis Covert Ops line. These start off obviously at Tech 7 here with the Celestis Covert Ops, but for the purposes of this video we are going to be looking at the Tech 10 T3 version, so the Celestis III Covert Ops, just so that we can compare these side by side without having to look at 3 ships per faction. But of course what I'm talking about here does still apply to the Celestis Covert Ops 2 and the 1 originally as well. Now, the reason I don't fly a Celestis Covert Ops is because I genuinely believe that this is the ugliest ship in the entirety of New Eden. I've referred to this previously as a vacuum cleaner that swallowed a banana. I've heard it referred to as a pregnant lady or a weirdly mutated fish. I have no idea what the designers were thinking of when they came up with this design. This is singularly hideous, and for that reason I just cannot bring myself to fly it. Like, I know I could play zoomed right the way out, but you know, I'd still know that I'm in it, and every time I dock up, I'd be forced to look at it. It's actually quite painful just looking at it here for this video, so we are going to move on, and sadly, not even any of the, you know, any of the nanocores or skins do anything to really improve that. Like, the Dark Halo looks cool, but once you see the profile and realise it's Celestis, you just kind of feel bad. Anyway, let's have a look at the attributes and fittings of this one then. So, Celestis III Covert Ops has a power grid of 763 megawatts, which is pretty sizable, good enough for everything we could want it for. We've got one drone tube launching small or medium drones, 4 high slots, 4 mid slots, and 4 lows. That is what I'd refer to as the standard Covert Ops Cruisers lineup at this tech level. 3 combat rigs, I'm still calling them power grid rigs, 3 combat rigs, and 3 engineering rigs. Defences are middling to low, but it's a Covert Ops Cruiser, it's kind of what you'd expect. 17,766, it's not terrible, but it is going to go down fairly quickly when you're targeted. I mean, it's better than destroyers or frigates at this level, but compared to other Tech 10 cruisers, yeah, it's just not particularly tanky. Most of that, being a Galente ship, is of course in the structure, over 5,000 there, with a good solid armour tank too, slightly middling to low shields. Definitely this is, if you're going to tank it as armour. Good capacitor banks is another thing that's fairly common across the Covert Ops ships, with a good aggressive recharge time. 7 max lock targets is standard for these ships and allows you to lock onto, well, 7 targets. Then we have that signature radius and flight velocity that I've already mentioned. 78.9 meters is pretty low. It's got a good flight velocity there of 283 meters per second, which is nearly, you know, sort of hitting speed tank levels. Scan resolution 343 is a little bit lower than I might like, especially since the Covert Ops Cloak is going to passively reduce that as well, but it's not awful, it's just, you know, low to bad. We've got a good warp speed, decent enough mass, and a good inertia modifier that makes this, as I said, fairly nippy, although the Celestis hull is a little bit more cumbersome than the other ones that we'll be looking at in a moment. Now, what makes the Celestis special? Well, we'll have a look at its trait descriptions. First of all, we have the roll bonus that every single one of these ships we're going to be talking about has, which is can fit Covert Ops cloaking devices and a 50% reduction to the cloaking device lock delay. Normally, when you drop a cloak, there's a 30-second delay before you can target something or start to target something more accurately. The Celestis III Covert Ops and all of the other Covert Ops cruisers have a 50% reduction to that, so it's only 15 seconds, which is still, frankly, plenty of time for your opponent to turn tail and escape, unless they're a battleship. But hey, the Celestis, it's one of those things. You're not really using this as an ambush. The Covert Ops Cloak is to help you get through gate camps or to go scouting. So you can jump into an anomaly, scout where the person is whilst cloaked, jump back out, and then warp back in again at a much better range for yourself with the cloak already off and the cooldown ready. Then, of course, we have its actual unique skills. Now, first of all, advanced micro warp drive operation here gives us a 10% increase to sensor dampener strength and a 10% reduction to warp drive signature radius penalty. Now, this means that when you activate a micro warp drive here on the Celestis III Covert Ops, instead of increasing the ship's signature radius by 500%, it's going to be a 50% reduction to that, so it'll only increase the signature radius by 250%. It's still a massive increase, but compared to the speed you're getting, it does help it out sort of in a speed tanky kind of way, I guess. I still wouldn't really be trying to speed tank with a micro warp drive here with the Celestis III Covert Ops, but that's not what it really needs. The 50% increase to sensor dampeners as well is surprisingly nice, especially if you're going up against something like a battleship that you really want to stop locking on. And if you put this onto like a couple of Celestis III Covert Ops with those sensor dampeners against like a logistics vessel, it can really mess with people, but I just don't rate sensor dampeners. What makes the Celestis III Covert Ops particularly nice though is advanced cruiser command. First of all, this gives us a 5% increase to scan resolution and 25% on the bad scan res that we had before, brings it quite comfortably into slightly above average, which is pretty good. I like that. I like anything that's above average. Signature radius -4%, obviously that's a 20% reduction at full training there. Does bring the Celestis III Covert Ops' signature radius all the way down to on the smaller end of destroyers, which is hilarious. But most notably, and the big thing that makes the Celestis, is its advanced cruiser command bonus of 12.5% increase to turret damage. Not cannons, not railguns, not lasers, not even decomposers. Turret damage, which means all of the above. That means if you have trained into medium decomposers, this is a ship that can actually use them and do surprisingly well with them. If you like your medium autocannons, the Celestis III Covert Ops can fit those and do monstrous DPS with those, or snub-nosed railguns, or lasers, or whatever the heck you fancy. The only thing this does not get bonuses to is missiles and drones. High slot wise though, it's only missiles that it doesn't get bonuses to. If it is a turret, so a decomposer, a laser, a railgun, or a cannon, then it is getting that bonus there. Which means if you're looking at the other Covert Ops Cruisers and going, well, I don't really want drones or missiles, this is the one for you, and it will cover all of your bases there. And that also allows you to fit the Celestis for different roles. If you really want to go a strong sniper role, you could do so with strike cannons. If you want to go super brawling, then you can warp in on someone with snub-nosed railguns and just rip them a new one up close and personal. You could go decomposers if you, like me, like the sound of those and want to pretend that the Anjung actually exist in the game. That's a way to do it. Now again, unfortunately, I can't personally get over the appearance of the Celestis III Covert Ops. It is by far, to me, the ugliest hull in the entire game, so I don't tend to fly these, but I know a lot of people who do, and come away from this as a really strong ship. Like, in PvP, the Celestis III Covert Ops is almost unmatched. It is terrifying what it can do to both frigates and destroyers, even to other cruisers and battle cruisers, based on whatever you want to fit it with. If you're hunting big prey, you're going to want high DPS, like snubs or autocannons. If you're hunting sort of like your smaller prey, heck, something with good tracking or even just good optimal range and good alpha, you can go with like the strikes and just sit at range and hit something if it's not moving, because you can play with its angular velocity due to the whole Covert Ops thing. I can't get over how the Celestis looks, but it is an absolutely solid hull that will do you really, really well. Let's move on then to the Caldari State Ship Tree to have a look at a line of Covert Ops Cruisers that I do actually fly fairly regularly, although probably the least flown of the 3 Covert Ops Cruisers that I tend to fly. We are of course talking about the Blackbird line of Covert Ops Cruisers. Now the Blackbird is actually a pretty cool looking hull. I like the rugged design of this one, I like the angular sides, I love how this sort of moves and shifts its shape as it warps and de-warps. It's a really cool looking ship, which is why I think it's really unfortunate that its uses are so niche compared to some of the other Covert Ops Cruisers out there, and I would consider these to be the most disappointing of the 4. Anyway, why is that? Well, if we look at the attributes and fittings, things start out strong with the Blackbird III Covert Ops. It's got that same fitting profile that we'd expect from a Covert Ops cruiser, up at tech level 10, 4 high slots, 4 mid slots, 4 low slots, 1 drone tube launching small or medium drones, and 3 combat rigs with 3 engineering rigs. So far, so good. We have a decent power grid output of 763 megawatts. We've also got a pretty solid defense of 17,167. Now, most of that is very much in the shield. It's a typical Caldari ship in that it is shields or nothing. The armor tank is fairly low, the structure tank is fairly low, it is all about those shields, and if you are to then active tank those, you can actually make this pretty tanky. We've got a good capacitor bank as well, 2,908 gigajoules with a fairly aggressive recharge time there and recharge rate, 7 lock targets as we saw before. Now, here's where things do start to come undone a little bit for the Blackbird line of Covert Ops Cruisers. The signature radius of 82 meters is the largest of the 4 Covert Ops types, and the flight velocity of 263 is also the slowest. So we've got the largest and the slowest moving of the Covert Ops Cruisers right here, along with the clunkiest in regards to its mass and inertia. When you multiply that out, this is the slowest to maneuver of the 4 Covert Ops ships at this tech level. Scan resolution is also pretty abysmal at 312. Now some of that does get improved with the bonuses, so it's not terrible at this point, it's just worse than the others. Things really come undone, however, later on in the trait description. Again, things start out strong when we look at this. We've got that can-fit Covert Ops cloaking devices and the 50% locking delay reduction, which is pretty nice. It's standard for a Covert Ops Cruiser. The advanced micro warp drive operation, again, those skills are really nice. 50% reduction to the warp drive signature radius penalty, making a micro warp drive pretty much the go-to propulsion unit for this ship. A 50% increase to guidance disruption strength makes this monstrous against other ships that are using missiles. If you're going PvP with the Blackbird III Covert Ops, which is where I do think it really shines, that guidance disruption strength means that if you're going up against a missile user, you are going to be dramatically reducing the range of their missiles, plus you're going to be increasing the application, making them worse at dealing damage and shorter range. It really hurts hitting someone who is fitted with missiles, hitting them with a guidance disruptor here on the Blackbird III Covert Ops. Now I'm kind of sad that it doesn't have the electronic countermeasures, ECM, that Caldari ships have in EVE Online. I'm sad that that doesn't exist in EVE Echoes, because that would make the Blackbird III Covert Ops something truly special. Unfortunately, here is where things start to fall apart. We still have that 4% reduction to signature radius. Again, obviously that's 20% at full training. It's nice. It still makes this sort of destroyer, lower end of the destroyer size and its signature radius, but the next two stats just are not great. We've got a 12.5% increase to missile torpedo damage per level. Compare that to the Bellicose, which gets a 15% increase to missile torpedo damage, and you might wonder, why is this one lower? And the reason this is lower is because it has this additional skill of sensor strength, 12.5% per level increase to sensor strength. Now, what does sensor strength do, you may ask? Absolutely nothing in EVE Echoes. It is a hangover skill from when the Blackbird 3 used to have ECM, electronic countermeasures. Without going into how that works, basically sensor strength makes your ECM better. Unfortunately, this is not a thing in EVE Echoes, so the Blackbird III Covert Ops gets a skill that no one can literally use. It is an utterly useless skill, and then pays the price of having that additional useless skill by having a reduction to its missile and torpedo damage. This means that for solo usage, the Blackbird III Covert Ops just isn't really that great a ship. For fleet usage in PvP, it definitely has a place thanks to the massive bonuses there to its guidance disruption systems. That can, warrant a place in a fleet. If you're going on a Covert Ops roam, you probably want to have at least one Blackbird III Covert Ops with you, where that guidance disruptor is going to make up for the fact that this is slower, slightly, less agile, and lower damage than the other Covert Ops cruisers can be. But if you're in a very small roam or on your own, that guidance disruption bonus doesn't quite cut it, sadly, and you're probably, if you're trained into missiles, going to want to have a look at the Bellicose, which is actually a really nice segue for us to move across to the next ship that we're going to look at, which is, of course, the Minmatar Republic's Bellicose Covert Ops line. Oh, did you see that one coming? Now, the Bellicose Covert Ops is actually one of my personal favourites. I like how this ship looks. I know it looks a little bit like a sniper rifle on a bipod. It's grown on me. I used to hate how this ship looked back in my EVE Online days. Nowadays, I'm a lot more comfortable with how this sort of looks. It's a very awkward looking ship, I understand, but I have a lot of fun flying these. And this comes down to, well, we'll go through its stats and we'll talk about it as we go. So first things first, as we look at its attributes and fittings, you'll notice that we have a power grid output here of 478 megawatts. This is the lowest power grid of all of the Covert Ops cruisers, and it is quite dramatically lower than the other ones that we've looked at so far, which had 768 if you need reminding. We've still got that same fitting profile of 444, 3 and 3 on the rigs, one medium-sized drone tube. The power grid, though, here does mean we have to be a bit more careful with what we fit. We can't go as crazy as we could on some of the others. I've seen people going through like Blackbird Covert Ops and oversizing to a large shield booster, for example, or a large shield extender. You just don't really have the power grid here for the Bellicose in order to do that. We do have solid defences though, not as heavy on the shields as the Blackbird, but heavier on its armour and structure instead to compensate. Again, not by much, but it is slightly overall more tanky. Again, weaker capacitor there as well, but it's to be expected from a Minmatar ship. Lowest signature radius of the 4 ships at its start here of 64.4 meters. Very small signature radius, and that only gets smaller as we go on, making this a very hard to hit ship. Flight velocity of 317 as well is the fastest of the 4 Covert Ops Cruisers at this level, so we've got a fast, small ship, good mass, good inertia, and also a very strong scan resolution of 367. Again, remembering that the Covert Ops Cloak is going to be reducing your scan resolution just by having it fitted, you want to have as best a scan resolution natively as you can get, and this, it's still not great. None of the Covert Ops Cruisers have a great scan resolution, but it's good enough to get the job done. As we go into the trait description though, this is where the Bellicose really starts to shine. Again, we've got that roll bonus of can fit Covert Ops cloaking devices, plus a 50% reduction to the lock delay, but then we have target paint to target effects as our advanced micro warp drive operation electronic warfare bonus. Still got that 50% reduction to warp drive signature radius penalty, which, considering how small this ship is to begin with, is just awesome, but that target paint to target effects is insanely good. Like, that's 50% additional target paint to target effects, and remember, target painters are really, really good with missiles, specifically with missiles. And what does the Bellicose get bonuses to? Oh yes, medium missiles and torpedoes. Essentially, you can use target painters here to make your targets bigger and thus apply damage considerably better with your missiles. Essentially, the Bellicose III Covert Ops' E-War significantly benefits the ship itself and everyone else in the same fleet, and it works on any target. This means you don't need to worry about using like medium rapids if you want to hit smaller, faster ships. You can do really well using standard medium missiles. You can hit the fastest moving frigates really easily and apply your damage really well because you are magnifying their signature radius so that those missiles do all the damage in the world that you could want them to. I love it. I absolutely adore the Bellicose III Covert Ops abilities there. It means you can sit at range with your missiles, with the long range medium missiles, and still apply your damage perfectly against really small targets. This on top of Advanced Cruiser Command giving you another reduction to your signature radius. 20% smaller signature radius on that 64.4 is just tiny. You are in frigate size ship there once that's all applied. Then we get a medium missile torpedo velocity, adding 25% additional range to your missiles, and a 15% medium missile torpedo damage bonus. Remember how I said the Blackbird only gets 12.5? Well, this means the Bellicose is going to out DPS the Blackbird, and it's going to have better application thanks to those target painters. I've been using the Bellicose Covert Ops line of ships in PvE for quite a while now. They can do surprisingly high level content. I can solo tech 10 sort of smalls and sometimes mediums using the Bellicose Covert Ops ships. You just orbit at a range, you use those target painters to take out the smallest ships first, and you just use your small size to sort of speed tank as much of the damage as possible with a micro warp drive. The Bellicose III Covert Ops is genuinely my personal favourite of the Covert Ops Cruisers. I just think it's a really powerful ship. Its bonuses all seem to synergise with itself nicely, making it an excellent solo PvP roamer. It works well in solo PvE, and it also works really well in a fleet since its target painters help out everyone. And for that reason, I adore this ship. I think it is one of the best. I don't think it is the best, it's just my personal favourite. Which brings us quite nicely then to the last ship on this list, which is of course the Amar Empire Arbitrator line of cruisers. This is the one that I picked up this morning, and it's it is the most powerful, as far as I'm concerned, of the Covert Ops cruisers. It's also really cool looking. I just love how this ship looks. I'm using the Tungsten Age core on mine at the moment. I bought it off a friend in Catskill earlier, and it looks so cool. I'm just going to close all this down and jump back out to showcase that, because just look at how he's made it look. Absolutely adore. Anyway, let's move into, not the contacts, wrong thing there, into the ship tree. We'll have a proper look at what makes the Arbitrator III Covert Ops tick, because in my opinion, this is the best of the Covert Ops cruisers, and with very good reason. Now, its power grid is lower than the others that you may have seen so far, but that's fine considering we're also only running 2 high slots alongside the usual 4 mids and 4 lows, so we've got 2 fewer high slots than we'd have on the others, requiring a lower power grid consumption there, so it doesn't actually matter. We've got 2 fewer slots than we had on the Bellicose, but we've got more power grid, so we don't have a problem with power grid on the Arbitrator. Arbitrator. We've still got 3 of each of the rig types, but you'll now notice we've gone from 1 drone tube all the way up to 4 drone tubes that can launch small or medium drones, and of course this means the Arbitrator is a drone ship. Now, defences are also very solid. We've got the highest raw defence of the 4 Covert Ops Cruisers at 18,434, and the majority of that is in the armour tank with a good amount in structure as well. Shields, however, really let this down. Do expect to have your shields stripped away in a very short period of time, but that kind of makes sense. It's an Amar ship. They're not renowned for their shields. They are, however, renowned for their capacitors, and again, this is a very aggressive capacitor, sizable at 2,390 gigajoules, with a very strong capacitor recharge rate of 540 seconds, and 11.06 gigajoules per second recharge rate. Signature radius is one of the smaller of the Covert Ops ships, and the flight velocity of 288 is also on the faster end of things as well. You're not quite as small or fast as a Bellicose, but you are still very small, very fast. With a solid scan resolution of 349, middling to sort of good mass and inertia as well, makes this fairly mobile. What really makes this sing though again is when we start looking at the trait description. Roll bonus is standard at this point, can fit Covert Ops cloaking devices and a 50% reduction to the lock delay. Then we have that tracking disruptor strength alongside our warp drive signature radius penalty. So again, no big bloom from using a micro warp drive, or half the size of the bloom from using a micro warp drive, but a 50% increase to tracking disruptors. This means that the Arbitrator III Covert Ops is a terrifying opponent if you are using turrets. This thing can literally rock up, hit you with one of those tracking disruptors, and just utterly ruin your ability to hit them. They're small, they're fast, and then they also reduce your ability to hit them with your turrets. That is attacking from both ends. It's burning the candle at both ends, and it makes for a double threat that is very, very scary. I've seen an Arbitrator III Covert Ops easily pull down a Macariel that it had locked down and just ripped it to shreds, knowing that the Macariel could do nothing. The double webs and the scram just wasn't sufficient for those large cannons, large auto cannons of all things, to actually be able to track effectively, and that in itself is terrifying. We also get a 3 kilometer increase to drone command range from Advanced Cruiser Command. It's 15 kilometers bonus there at Advanced Cruiser Command 5, which it's a nice bit of extra range there. That means your drones can start applying damage quickly, and if you want to try and outrange your opponent, you can try and do so with your drones. 4% signature radius reduction, obviously 20% at full training there. Again, makes a very small ship even smaller. And then we have the drone DPS. 30% drone DPS per level, obviously 5 levels, 150% drone DPS increase there is monstrous, and it's that versatility that really makes the Arbitrator III Covert Ops stand out, especially as a solo PvP threat. The fact that those drones are capable of doing so much damage, and they can do that damage whether you are sitting at 0 kilometers or whether you're out at 35, 40 kilometers, however far you can get your drone command range to be, whether you rig for it or if you're just skilling. Heck, if you're just skilling, you can easily get to sort of anywhere up to sort of the 45 kilometer range here with the Arbitrator III Covert Ops. So you can go long range, you can go short range, and you can still apply really, really well. So if you think you can outrange your target, then you can do that and just apply your damage from that distance. If you think you can't outrange them, then the tracking disruptors are going to wreck their turrets' capabilities, and you can just orbit at 0 and stop them ever hitting you that way. Now, the advantage of this as well is that there are no specific bonuses, no specialized bonuses to any high slot weapon. If you want to put missiles on an Arbitrator, you can. If you want to put autocannons on it, you can. If you want to put lasers, decomposers, railguns, whatever you want to put in those high slots, you can do it. Obviously, if you're going to go for a long-range kiting fit, I would look at something like rifled railguns, strike cannons, or medium missiles. And if you want to go for something that is going to absolutely rip them apart at close range, look no further than either snub-nosed railguns or autocannons. I quite like fitting medium autocannons onto mine and just going in 0, orbiting really tightly on ships far bigger than I am, and using those drones to rip them apart, with those autocannons applying a hefty amount of DPS at close range. Again, if I want to go at range though, I'd swap to medium missiles, considering the skills that I personally have on this particular pilot. And that's why the Arbitrator III Covert Ops is such a terrifying proposition to face, because you just don't know if this thing is going to go at range, or if it's going to get right up in your grill, up close and personal. And quite frankly, it's got the tools to deal with that either way. Again, the tracking disruptors, they're not only going to ruin the tracking speed of your turrets, they will also wreck the optimal range and full accuracy fall off, which means you can actually outrange several weapons and just have reduced application that way too. It is a double threat, it is a terrifying ship to face on its own, but several of them at once becomes absolutely monstrous. It also works really well for PvE, and that's exactly why I've picked one up here. Anyway folks, that really does wrap up quite nicely everything that I wanted to say about the Covert Ops Cruisers today. I do apologise for my voice, I've not been feeling well, I've not been sleeping well the past couple of days, so my throat is a little bit off, my nose is a bit off, but thank you for bearing with me. I do hope you enjoy this. Let me know which of the Covert Ops Cruisers you enjoy most if you fly them yourself, or if you've faced one of these, which ones do you find most terrifying? If there's a particular one of these you're most interested in, let me know as well. I'd like to do a fitting guide or something like that if I can get the time to sit down, put in one of those, and we can talk about one of these in specific. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Otherwise, thank you for listening right the way to the end. Happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!